Mark 6:47 to 50 reads this way. Late that night, the disciples were in their boat in the middle of the lake, and Jesus was alone on the land. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and the waves. Jesus came toward them walking on the water. And here's the thing, when they saw him walking on the water, they cried out in terror, thinking he was a ghost. And this is what Jesus said to them. He says, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." And so we see the disciples here in a boat in the middle of a raging storm, dark and fierce, and they're facing extreme weather conditions. They have trouble rowing, perhaps to gain control, but there was such resistance. The Bible even says that even the wind was against them. So fear had set in. It felt uneasy, uncomfortable, and definitely not safe. And here's the thing, where was Jesus? How were they going to get through this? Well, Jesus was there the whole time. He was walking on the water. He was literally in the middle of the storm with them. And you know, the Bible says the disciples didn't recognize Jesus in the midst of the storm. And oftentimes, you and I may face unexpected storms in our life. And when we do, sometimes we may not see Jesus. But you know, Jesus really is there. And even if we don't see Jesus, he sees us. You know, Jesus says again in Mark 6:50, "Take courage. It is I, Jesus. Do not be afraid." And so storms will come in our life, and it seems like the winds are strong, and it's dark, and it's uncontrollable. And oftentimes fear will set in our life. But I want to remind you what Jesus says to you today. He says, "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." And so when the storms come, as fear sets in, we can fear many, many things. We can fear sickness. We can fear uncertainty for tomorrow. You can even fear your past. You can fear your future, what will happen to your children, and maybe you may even be fearing death. You know, here's what we need to do to overcome that fear. We can overcome anything through the power of Jesus Christ. Here's what we can do. Number one, we must believe that God is with us always. He will never leave us nor forsake us. Psalm 23:4 says this, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because you are with me." We must believe him at his word. This is how we break away from fear. This is how we aren't constrained by fear, believing him at his word. When you're afraid, here's another verse for you. Psalm 56:3. "When I am afraid, I will trust in you." In times of darkness in your life, when you feel the darkness is just surrounding you, here's another verse for you. Psalm 27:1. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my stronghold of my life. Whom shall I be afraid?" You know, fear is debilitating. Fear can immobilize us, and the enemy uses fear so we will not fulfill the destiny that God has planned for us. What does God have planned for us? To live in freedom. We are designed to live in freedom, and we are not to be bound by fear. And God's design is for us to break out of that fear. The enemy cannot debilitate us any longer because God is with us. So here's what we need to do. We need to believe that God is with us. We need to believe him at his word. And we also need to do this. We need to understand that fear can no longer control our lives. We can uproot fear and build our faith simply by believing in God. So Here's the next step we need to do. We need to break up with fear. Yes, we need to break up with fear and say, fear, you don't own me. I belong to Jesus. Jesus lives in me. And because Jesus lives in me, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom.